Well, hello. Hi, Cyan. Hi, Lee. It's great to have you on. I think this is an exclusive. I don't know if I've seen both of you on a podcast before, but I'm so happy to have both of you here.
Yeah.
We're hopefully going to have the full long journey team in the future, but this will be a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I thought it was a great idea. No one ever asked us to do both of us. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Because, Sam and I have a really fun and history and fun relationship. And hopefully that'll come across today.
So I want to dive deep into Long Journey's unique strategy. You've built out a brand, a community, and to start, let's really break this down into what the Magically Weird is. Lee, what is the ethos behind Magically Weird?
Yeah, great question. When we look back a few years ago, we look back at sort of like what are the best investments that I had been a part of. And I had known Sonia at the time. What had she had been a part of? What had her husband Scott been a part of? What have Naval, who I used to work for at AngelList? And there was never any theme of like it was really a hot space or it was a hot round or it was any particular theme. The only thing that really kept coming up was that the company looked quite weird at the time. Sam likes to tell the story, which I'll let her tell. But when Uber got started, who was going to get into other people's cars? The black market, the black car market was really small. This is not a thing. Niantic is a good example of, there's going to be Pokemon walking around the streets of San Francisco. That sounds a little nuts. When Crusoe got started, they're going to mine Bitcoin in the middle of North Dakota with like fire that comes out of the ground. That sounds a little insane. So we've really honed in on what we think great companies look like at the time in which we invest, which is the pre-seed and seed. We think they look quite weird at the time. So what that manifests in is it can be frontier, kind of weird looking things, but we also do, magically boring businesses run by crazy people. And that itself is a weird thing to do, to actually want to work on something like government RFPs. Why would someone want to do that? Well, you have to be kind of crazy and weird to do it. And that I think creates its own defensibility. So yeah, that's what magically weird means to us, and yeah, happy to go into it further if you want. Cyan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a siren call as well. We only not only did we notice it, but we started realizing that we want to be a home for these people, so that when they realize they're going out and pitching people and people just aren't getting it. If you've pitched 20 VCs or angel investors and they're like, I don't quite understand what it is that you're building, or it's too soon, or it's a lot of things. We really love that phone call. We love getting the phone call of, another VC calls us and says, I just got this weird thing that landed in my inbox and it seems interesting, but I don't understand it. I think you guys will.
And I think Cyan brings a very good point. It's we're looking for is that a little glimmer of intuition that someone has, where they're like, I think this is interesting, but I'm not sure I can express it, or I'm not sure I can tell my friends, or I'm not sure I can tell my boss. Those things tend to be the things that are really interesting, because if it was easy to talk about, or if it was something that everyone's going to like, by definition, it might be consensus, or it might be actually, it might be too obvious an idea. If it's something that you have an inkling on, that you have a feeling about, we pay attention to that. So yeah, we're looking for things that other people are not really paying much attention to.
How are you finding them?
Oh, gosh.
All different places. I think, yeah, I mean, Cyan has had so many interesting stories. We've all had great ways of finding companies. I think one thing that I think is true is that we've really built a brand for doing that kind of thing. I think I actually have an inbox. I looked at my email 5 minutes ago, and there is an email that says, I have a weird one for you. I mean, that happens quite a bit these days, where people are like, the only people that we can really think about sending this to is you guys. And then when you invest in these people that are really independent thinkers, and they end up in interesting companies and start great things, they tend to have friends like that. And so it really compounds on itself. So you kind of get into the game of these independent type of founders that are doing out there things. And then they also have other people who, frankly, those people can be lonely. And if they find friends and other people like them. And so that really compounds itself.
Yeah, and I think through events is another big way that we do this. It going back to the compounding nature of this. We have a flock, if you will. Well, we're part of the flock, but we have this flock of people that we, we gather and we get together and we have events and we invite others into it, and people get to see what our values and our mission are and live them. And that sort of thing radiates and just compounds over time.
I like to say we're never going to do an event that's like a boring AI event where it's like 7 VCs and 2 founders, and your job is to like talk about the future of AI. And someone's like, well, yeah, it's going to do this. And it's just everyone's been to those dinners and they suck. We want our events to be memorable. And we're really trying to put people in a position where they are comfortable to be themselves, because I think founders are looking to work with people that they want to build long-term relationships with. And the only way to get to do that is to actually create a setting people can be authentic. And on the other side, if you're really looking for things that other people aren't going to find, you need to know who these people are. Because if they're just going to say what the future of AI is, it's not a great way to get to know someone.
I have to admit, I think you guys are drumming up some demand and some FOMO for these events, because I keep on hearing about these dinners from multiple people all over the country. So you're definitely doing a really good job there, creating unique atmospheres for people to get to know one another. But I want to know, like, what is the recipe for this event? Like, how do you construct these unique dinners or community building efforts where people can be themselves and not just talk about what's ever happening in AI land?
Yeah, I'll happily take this. When Lee and I founded the firm, we sat down and talked about all of the things in our careers so far that we didn't like and that what we wanted to be different about. And one of the things I hate more than anything, and Lee does too, is going to these network events where you're walking around with your drink and you come up to someone and you're like, and it's the same question over and over again, which is, what are you excited about? And I remember Peter Thiel once told me, he said, when someone says, what are you excited about? It's because they don't know what to be excited about themselves. And so they're fishing you to try to get excited about something because they lack it in their lives. And so they're outsourcing their work to you. And so he asked, what are you upset about? What keeps you up at night? What worries you? And so I really like that. And I really like that about Peter and one of the things I learned from him. But we started thinking about, okay, is there a way that we can build our firm that's values driven, but also have events that when we invite people to them, it really aligns with our values, but it's also super fun, so fun that you don't even feel like you're working. But at the same time, when everybody leaves this event, they're like, what the heck did I just go to? That was so amazing. I made a good friend. I found a co-founder. I came up with an idea I never thought I would have before. And I solved a problem I didn't even realize I would solve it. So how you do that, we figured we got to bring somebody in to help with this. And so we brought in Mike Wang. And Mike Wang is an amazing experience designer. And he calls these recipes. Every time we do one of these events, he comes up with a recipe. And he's taught me this language, which I really love, which is every event has ingredients, just like in making a soup has ingredients, right? You have your broth, maybe you have carrots or onions or whatever. And every event that you normally go to has these base ingredients. But what they don't do is spice it up a bit or make it much more interesting so that you remember it as the best soup you've ever had in your life. And so we have all the key ingredients, but what we do is we say, okay, instead of it going this way, what if we turn it on its head? What if we, eliminate small talk? So from the very get-go, we're like, do not walk around and do this. Instead, we're going to give you a prompt. And this prompt is going to open you up in ways. For example, we had a dinner one time that talked about superstitions. And we went around the table and people confessed all their superstitions. And what was really interesting was that everyone had one. And some of them were fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And then there was games that we play at these dinners, and there's a lot of things that we do. And at the end, people are disarmed and authentic. So the authenticity comes out. People are, able to be themselves. We're able to surprise and delight them. And then most importantly, we show them a different way of living. And they can then steal that idea. We want people to steal the ideas. If they come to one of our events and they see something and they're like, wow, I want to do this with my team at work, or I want my next offsite retreat to be like this. By all means, do it, because that's why we do it, is we're trying to show companies, founders, colleagues, LPs, that there's a different way that you can live life. There's a different way that you can conduct business, and that you really, truly enjoy it. And it lifts your spirit, and it makes you excited to do what you do every day. And you make meaningful connections and meaningful memories out of it. An example I like to give is we did this movie screening, and this came about because Mike and I and all of us were riffing on this concept of free will. And we were wondering, like, everyone's talking about whether we have free will or not. Well, how do we express that? Do we write a blog post? Do we get on a podcast? I was like, why don't we have a movie festival and start showing movies that, discuss the concept of free will and leave it kind of up to them. But if you just do a movie screening on its own and you hand out popcorn, then you're in the land of boring again, right? So the first one that we did right before the movie started, we had a second screening where right before the movie started, we said, well, in order to discuss the concept of free will, we're going to give you an option B you didn't even know existed, which is you can stand up right now, leave this movie, go to a theater that's a little outside next door where you're going to see a movie that you have no idea what it is. But we're going to vote on it. So when you go over there, we're going to hold up some movies and we're going to vote. And so the first movie was Arrival, and I showed up in an Arrival suit wearing the contamination unit outfit. And but then I left the theater, and what was interesting is about 30 people got up and went with me, and we ended up watching The Game. And 2 separate conversations happened in both of those rooms that were equally as important, but right for the right people that stayed in them, and that had a profound impact on some people, and they're still talking about it to this day. And then the second one was The Matrix, which is a classic one, if you're talking about free will. And right when Neo is about to take the red or blue pill or make the choice when Morpheus hands those pills over, we stopped the movie. We brought the house lights up a little bit, and then a phone on the stage that was a rotary phone started ringing. And our idea was to let it ring and ring and ring and ring forever if we had to until somebody answered it. And then the person who answered it, they were given a choice, which is you take the blue pill, you go back to your seat, you eat your popcorn, life goes on as normal, you watch The Matrix, that's what you came for. Or you take the red pill, you gather all your things, you leave the theater, and you're going to go to some undisclosed location and you have no idea what's about to happen. And this guy didn't hesitate. And he said, red pill. He's like, can I bring my wife? We're like, yes. And so outside we had a limo where we swept him away to a 1-star Michelin pop-up experience that only existed for one night, where he got to eat Chinese, Mexican, Michelin star food. And what was really, really fascinating about it was just before he ran up to the stage, he said to his wife, they were discussing what an NPC is. And he said, am I an NPC? And she said, no, you're not an NPC. And he's like, well, what is an NPC? And she explained it. And he said, if an opportunity arrives in the world, I'm going to answer the call.
Oh my God.
Exactly. So he did just that. And these are the types of, and he, afterwards he told us it was one of the best nights, if not the best night of his life. And if you can do that for somebody, if you can give somebody the best night of their life, that's far more important than just an event, right? Like you've fundamentally changed someone's life and the perspective of how they can have fun and how they can engage with people. Like now this person and I text back and forth, and I didn't know him before this. This was somebody we invited that spoke at an event previously, and we were not friends yet. But now we're friends and we have a meaningful connection. Whereas before, had we gone up to each other and just clinked our glasses together, it wouldn't have been that meaningful. But now I know more about him and his wife and his family and his plight in this world because we had that intimate moment of realness where we were hyper present with one another.
Our strategy is just to make more friends.
Make more friends. We just want to make more friends.
Yeah, make more friends. Yeah.
That's incredible. That is an incredible story. And I love the questions I love getting asked questions like that, like really abstract, but like kind of goofy, not really goofy, but they're just, you wouldn't expect it kind of questions at dinners or work events, whether it's superstitions or like phobias. And then you're just going around the table and you're like, I had no idea you had a phobia of like candles. That's crazy. Simple things like that, but it helps break down the barrier and like get down to your more creative self, which I think is really important.
I do have a phobia of candles.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
New facts from Cyan today. I'm gonna write that one down. I keep a list of things that are very special
funny
about
because
Cyan, and
people
that's
keep asking-
it's going in there.
Yeah, people keep asking me why I don't have any candles. It's because it's funny you should bring that
Oh,
one up because that is my number one phobia. Candles.
Oh
oh.
gosh.
Can you explain? Is it about starting a fire or?
Yes,
I'm
because
sorry
the
for.
fumes?
I'm interviewing my partner now at the
Yeah,
moment. I'm
no,
very
go
interested.
for it.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
important.
Well, yeah.
it's because when I
Yeah.
was little, I was told this story about how my mother accidentally set her house on fire playing with candles, and it caught a curtain on fire and then
Oh,
on fire, and so it got really drilled into me that candles are dangerous, and if you don't mind them, the bad things can happen. And so I have not kept candles around ever since, and I don't like being around them, and I don't. It's like I know where it came from, and I know that if you tend to a candle, it's not going to light your house on fire. Like I can understand the logic behind a safe candle. I just don't keep any. If anyone gives me one, I give it away immediately.
Fireplaces, matches, lighters. Where does fire stand?
Yeah, I mean, I have a fire stove, but I tend to it, right? Like you have to be very mindful and present with a stove. You can burn a house down with a stove. So I don't like lighting fireplaces. I don't like. I just think fire belongs in certain settings, and I try to keep it away from me.
I respect that. Lee, do you have any phobias you want to talk about?
Oh man,
Crows.
I don't think I have any. Oh, yeah, well, a good one. Yeah. So I was walking in Austin with Ariel, our other partner, about a year and a half ago, and we had just met a pretty well-known founder, and we were just talking about that, and that was really interesting. And a crow landed on my head. Out of nowhere. And the way that I experienced it was I felt this weird thing. And then I looked at someone who was walking towards me, and they were just like, what's going on? They were shocked. And then I realized that this crow just came on my head and fell off. And of course, Ariel, who I love, all she could do was laugh. She wasn't going to help me. She wasn't like, hey, there's a crow on your head. She just started cracking up and watched this crow land on my head. So I have noticed that in the last, ever since that, there are crows all over the place, and they're always kind of following me. I think I have a number of theories. I think it's because I once heard a pigeon a long time ago by throwing a pen at it. It was in an area that it shouldn't have been, and it hit the pigeon, and the pigeon wasn't very happy. And pigeons and crows are friends, like everyone knows, and I'm just dealing with that. So anyway, it scratched the top of my head, and there's a theory it could be thought that it was my hair's a nest. We don't know, but a crow did land on my head. So that is a first time telling that story publicly. So
remember, I got the text message right afterwards, and I was like, "What is going on?"
yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Might be so good funny. Luck. Could be impressive. I don't know. Maybe it's your spirit animal.
Yeah. Well, now that it's out there, maybe someone could tell me what they think it means.
Yeah, let us know. Comment and let us know what the crow means.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, I love that. So the strategy, the strategy and the branding around Magically Weird. I was thinking about this. It's like marketing. It attracts things. You typically draw in people from all these different places. So, what does Magically Weird attract? Like, what does that look like, and how does that come together?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for misfits, free-thinking people who didn't fit in in a company. They couldn't be employed. Like a lot of, I forget what Breck says, but he says, what did he say? He's never been hired, only been fired.
It's something like that. Yeah, that's actually true. Yes, exactly. That's right. He's only been hired.
Because every company he's ever built that he's been acquired, he ends up like, and there's certain character traits to a founder, right? They don't fit in places for a reason. They think about the world differently. They think about, they're not trying to fit in. They're actually trying to break things or remold things to this vision that they have. And so, I think that every fund has its own flavor. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched Mad Men. Did you ever watch Mad Men, the show? Might be too long ago. But there's this one episode where they talk about the cigarette company that they're trying to brand. And they say that, all cigarettes at that point are fungible. And they say, well, we're going to call your cigarette Toasted. If you think about it, all VCs are kind of, we have money, it's the same, right? It's not, the money's not different. So what makes us stand apart is our ethics and who we are and what we stand for and our compass. And then the siren call that we're putting out for the types of people we want to show up at our doorstep. And so we're looking for people who are really, really independent thinkers that are dreaming big in ways that are going to reshape humanity. You know, if you look at Airbnb, the founder said, you know, people are going to sleep on strangers' couches. And everybody said, well, you're insane. You know, those are the types of people we want. You know, the people who just have this insight that whatever it is that they're going to work on is going to change how everything's done. I mean, you think maybe you could talk about Chase, like when he showed up at your door and tried to convince you to go to South Dakota and jump on a plane with him to harness energy from gas flares. Like, what did you?
Yeah. It's I don't know how much people know about the business Crusoe. It's an AI data center business at the moment, but when it started, he showed up. We had a nice conversation at Dandelion Chocolate, and he basically was like, there's all this gas that comes out of the ground in places like North Dakota, and it's wasted and it's burnt away, and it's in these huge fireballs. And so that's one problem. And the other side of it at the time, since 2017, 18, Bitcoin was just kind of continuing to ramp up, and it was very energy intensive. And it's a huge problem for the industry. And so he was he was at Polychain at the time. He grew up with a friend that was in the oil and gas industry, and he kind of learned about the flaring issue. And so he was like, yeah, I took basically like a truck with a bunch of servers and moved them out into the middle of North Dakota and started mining Bitcoin in like the oil and gas world. And everyone in the oil and gas world was like, what are these crazy nerds doing? And then no one in the crypto world was like, oh, it seems like a great idea. I'm going to put some servers in, the middle of North Dakota and see what happens. So I remember thinking that's one of the more absurd things I've ever heard. Like, tell me more. And so that's a great example of, the kind of thing we look for, which is often something you've never heard before. It could be easily dismissed. It was certainly dismissed at the time. But if you look past and you're willing to like really think about why is this person so excited about it? What's actually behind there? You can discover secrets. And then the other piece of that is actually and something that I really, really respect Cyan for is willing to stick your neck out for things even if it's not popular. And so I think that's a big piece of what we do at Long Journey. We're willing to put our neck out there, and it's a reinforcing thing. We encourage each other. If you believe in something, and we want to support everyone to do that. So.
Yeah, the other thing is we're looking for people that this is their life mission. Maybe they had a certain type of upbringing, or they grew up in a certain region of the world that impacted this decision that gives them a unique insight that nobody else could have. That's the vote.
Totally. And which ties back to what we were talking about earlier with the events, which is you put people in these moments where you can really understand, as you said, Molly, like these creative moments, and they're thinking about things creatively. You can see inklings of like what it is about for them. And often those things that when they're relaxed and they're thinking about something interesting, there's often a tie back to like what it is they're doing and why they're working on that thing. And those are the things you want to discover, not just like, hey, I've got a business plan and I'm going to go and sell SaaS, things. It's going to be $9.99 and people are going to love it. Like everyone says that. There's no alpha in that. You're looking for like, what's a little interesting, what's a little out there about what's going on. You can only figure that out if you put people in a good environment.
Yeah, that's
absolutely. True. And that's so important at the earliest stages too, when story is probably one of the number one driving factors of why things get funded. Founders and the story. And for Long Journey Ventures, you guys have evolved from early stage to later stage too. I'd love to unpack more of the originations of the fund and what that looked like to today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think about it as like we want to have as the biggest impact as we can, but we want to grow in an organic and responsible way. And as Cyan said, we're very values oriented, and one of our values is it's not monopoly money. And so the origin of kind of going from super early stage, which is never going to change, we're always going to do that and be a big part of what we do, from doing more follow-on checks and at slightly later stages is we saw a lot of our companies mature. The Crusoes, the Flock Securities, the Andurils, the Diamond Foundries, all these things that we continued to, we're very early on, and continue to have a good relationship with. And we saw that they were still misunderstood. They were still magically weird, even after raising a Series B or C. So there was still alpha there. So initially we just, and my roots at AngelList I did the first AngelList Syndicate and did a lot of SPVs. I knew that there was this mechanism in which we could start investing in some of these companies that were not pre-seed and seed, but we still thought there was a lot of upside in. So we started doing it in 2020 when Cyan and I founded the fund. We started doing some SPVs in some of these opportunities. We did Anduril in that period and a few others. And as that strategy grew, and it started working and those companies went on to, continue to grow, we designed a strategy and a fund around it. But what it wasn't like, oh, we're going to raise like a $200 million fund. We think that there's all these, we can do this strategy and we'll just try it. It was more a very thoughtful and meticulous way of building this thing out. And that's kind of how we've grown AUM in that direction. And that's why we've done it. We want to continue to support the businesses that we really believe in, and think we have a really incredible strategy for them. Ariel was a huge part of that too. When she brought her on, she had a traditional background at Coatue and Kleiner and was used to writing those slightly later stage checks than we are.
Going back to the origination story, Lee and I's roots are in angel investing, and we both met at AngelList. We're both AngelList alumni, and we had a remarkable time there together, and that's how Lee and I started collaborating at first, which was, how do we solve this problem where we can make access available to people for deals that they didn't previously have access to? We both wanted to serve this higher calling. One was him to find the next emerging fund managers, but most importantly, at the end of the day, was to share the deals with other investors, other angel investors who maybe they're just getting started and they could write micro checks. But micro checks, as we know, add up into larger checks. But we also knew that founders didn't want to deal with all these people on the cap table. And so Naval had this brilliant, and all of the engineers there had this brilliant insight that they could build a platform around this. And I was angel investing at the time, and I decided, I want to share my deal flow. I want to go join Naval and help him build this. And that's where we met. And then when I went on to Founders Fund, Lee and I collaborated a lot. And the only deals that really stood out when I was there that were differentiated from everybody else's were coming from Lee. And, he was sending, whenever there's a wave and there's a consensus wave, you get all of the same things. So like right now, the consensus wave might be defense or AI. And so you're going to get a lot of stuff coming in. Like you'll notice the weird ones that come in that aren't out of central casting, and you're like, what is that? And that was Lee. He was like, I'm going to bring in these companies from Brazil. No one was looking in Brazil at the time. And he was bringing the best companies from Brazil to us. Or I'm going to bring Crusoe, this gas flaring business, or Mind Bloom, or, the list just goes on, Modern Animal. And it just, these were not companies that were coming our direction. And so some of our best deals at Founders Fund came from Lee. And so when I left and I wanted to do something different, I just thought that I can't think of anybody better to work with. And so I reached out to him and he was like, duh.
That's my exact quote. I was like, duh. We had this great energy and I just, I thought that there was a world in which we would work together, and it was really an honor when she asked, but I kind of like, I knew it was going to happen, and I'm glad it has. It's been such an incredible journey, and we're just getting started. I mean, it's been about almost 5 years of working together formally, but more.
Our fund one together is fun too. Lee had a micro fund and had already established Long Journey by the time I joined, and so if anything, he had momentum going already, and I got to hop along on the ride of the momentum. But it was a great time to join because we got to sit down and really put our heads together and think about how we wanted to build this and build the firm of our dreams that we want to show up to every day. and that makes us proud of our work and what we do.
It certainly seems like you guys have known each other for forever. Like
It feels
there's
like it.
real compatibility there.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Do you believe in other lives? Maybe we were friends in other lives too.
Yeah.
Maybe you were just two crows.
There might have
There
been
you go. Huh.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, now we're transitioning. I know you want to talk about spirituality, so maybe that's the easiest way to do it.
Should we go right into spirituality now?
It's
Let's
your
do it.
call. It's your show, Molly. You get to decide.
You're right. Thank you. Okay, yes. So let's go into that because I think that it's very aligned with our conversation in general, whether it's bringing people together or like thinking of something different, just being a part of something. So spirituality has been taking a shift in Silicon Valley. Maybe it's more than Silicon Valley, but here I am in my echo chamber and I'm seeing, Trey Stevens and Gary Tan, and I'm seeing the El Segundo crew as well, taking on different meanings of bringing back spirituality. So what does this mean for you guys and what have you noticed?
Yeah, it's a nationwide trend. It is not just in Silicon Valley. I think I saw a statistic the other day that Bible sales are on the rise by like 28%. And most of those are first-time readers. And I think what happened is the pandemic. There's two types of people during the pandemic. There were the people that were first responders who had to get up in the morning and go to work and work through it and be in the public. And they dealt with their own kind of suffering and trauma as a result of that. And then there's the second group, which had to withdraw from the world and hide. And that was also traumatic in its own weird way. And so I think everyone had to reflect on that period and wonder one, you have to ask yourself, if there's a God, how could a pandemic happen? How could we be in this position to begin with? And then you start asking all kinds of questions, which is, why do we exist? What is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? And the list goes on and on and on and on. And not everybody just became a bread maker, like a lot of people, you also saw these people learn how to make bread or fire up pizzas or whatever, or start a garden but I think people unplugged for a period of time or disconnected from the world that they knew for long enough that they actually started to let something inside that they'd never let in before. And that was the belief that there's something bigger than themselves. And so I think what we're seeing right now, and there's, I personally believe that there's a truth and it's like a mirror, and the mirror has fallen to the ground and there's fragments all over the place. And certain religions and certain beliefs come and they take that fragment and they build something on top of it, but they all lead up the mountain to the truth. And so it doesn't matter what flavor you pick. It could be Buddhism, it can be Christianity, it could be whatever it is, but sometimes just relinquishing the control of the ego, of the mind, that you are somehow in charge of everything and that you're responsible for everything, and moving into this mindset that you're part of a greater whole or a greater cause, a part of humanity, is what people are starting to realize. And I'm excited. I'm here for it because I do think that, the other opposite of the side of the coin is to believe that you are responsible, you are, that all brilliance and everything flows through you and all of these things. And that's just the ego talking, right? It's a very ego-driven activity. And when you start destroying the ego and removing the ego is when real magic starts to happen. When you actually can see the world differently, when you can actually start to look at your neighbor differently, the person down the street differently. And this is how we get and maintain world peace, is through love. And some religions don't preach love, and you should run away from any religion that doesn't preach love. If love is not the core tenet of the religion or the spirituality practice, then I would argue that, it's not the right one. But we should love one another, and we should try to build things, and we should try to make things that promote that. And so a lot of what I do, and I've been very passionate about this, and Lee is very passionate about it too, is encouraging every member of our team and all of the partners to have a higher purpose that they serve. It doesn't matter what flavor it is. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's higher than themselves. And so that's usually charitable causes, educational causes, It could be whatever it is, but align your profit with your purpose. And when you do that, I really honestly feel that doors just start to open for you. They just open in your favor, because if there is a power out there, or if there is energy or a universe or God or whatever you want to call it, it's almost as if you're rewarded tenfold when you do good for the world.
Yeah, I agree with everything Cyan said, and I'd add that while I think it is a new thing to talk about it is something that has been going on in the best, I'll call them endeavors, not just businesses, but all of human achievement. The best human achievement has had this motivation and the singular idea behind it. I mean, in our industry, we can mention Sequoia. I mean, they obviously they're the best, have done it historically for many years. If you go into their offices, you walk in, all the conference names are their LPs. It's Ford Foundation or whomever else is the sort of the causes that back them. And whenever they have an IPO, the CEO of the company is on the front of the page, but there's also like, here's what this money goes towards. And it becomes extremely aligning when you have that type of, call it a mission, but call it beyond a reason beyond yourself. Cyan said that is what I think a lot of spirituality is. And then you do good work as a consequence. I'd be interesting you can't really do a counterfactual of this, but after the Giving Pledge, and Cyan turned me onto this a few years ago, basically a lot of these billionaires basically said, we're going to give X percent. I think it's more than 50% of their wealth. There's a pretty strong correlation between a lot of those businesses and those CEOs continuing to build a lot of value after doing that. And I wonder, is there a causal reason there?
It's super interesting. I was just listening to Morgan Housel on Dr. Huberman's podcast, and they were both discussing this as well. The giving back and all the billionaires donating up to almost 99% of their wealth back, and what the meaning of purpose is, and carrying on legacy, or building something for your own. And it's like quite an interesting question for at least like American capitalism, which I love capitalism, which is great, but running towards just building something for wealth or building something for meaning. Like there's two different things. And from founders or people I've heard that are post exit and that just really purely built it for the wealth, felt completely empty the day after they sold it. And there was just a really clear bifurcation between the two.
It's the same thing for musicians, actors, and everybody else, right? Like when you have your hit and then what? It's like, okay, now what? Like I did all of this. Because it's a game, then they achieved the game and they thought that it was over, but then they're sitting there with all this money and they're like, I can only drink so many Mai Tais and sit on so many beaches and buy so many cars. You're a steward of the capital. It's not yours. You don't get to really die with it, right? So if anything, it's fuel for a fire. And what fire do you a good fire, what fire do you want to burn? What fuel?
Not of a candle.
Not a candle, yes. But what fire do you want to burn, and what do you want your fuel to be a part of? And that, I mean, those reasons are as individual as thumbprints, right? Like, for me, I'm very, very passionate about the First Amendment. And most of the causes I donate to are First Amendment related, or Second Amendment, or Fourth Amendment, anything constitutional. But for our partners, it's different. And so, I would advise every founder, before you start your company, think about the higher purpose that you want to serve, so that when you are finally successful and you reach that endpoint, you know exactly what that money's for. And that way you're like, yep, that was just a stepping stone to get to this bigger thing that I actually want to do, which is I want to give everyone a bicycle, or I want to solve water in Africa, or I want to solve, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's for other people and it's bigger than yourself.
There was a movement maybe 10, 15 years ago that came out, and I think it's worth noting because there can be a distortion of this concept, which I don't know how to call it, social impact investing, or just a focus on the businesses that had to be a certain way to deterministically decide how the world had to be. And then that became the goal. And from our perspective, we think of ourselves as a social impact fund because we do believe in businesses themselves will do really good things for the world. And we are going to do good things with the money that we earn. But I do think there's a distortion around if you're trying to do. Actually, Trey Stevens has this great chart that I think he's talked about where it's feels good. There's this quadrant basically, and if it's like feels good and is good, or actually feels good and might not and is bad, that is actually potentially a distortion. And if it's i.e. it's not a good business, but it feels good to do it, that actually doesn't have an impact at all. So I think you can go the wrong way if you're not careful. So that I think is worth mentioning.
Yeah. You think almost all investing is what was that word that you used again? Social
impact. Social impact. Yeah.
All investing it can be socially impactful, and capitalism itself is socially impactful. And I know people wanted to brand themselves and put a flavor on it because again, it's toasted like cigarettes, but they're really fundamentally what we're all doing is making the world a better place if we choose to do so. And so we get to choose where we put our dollars and our effort and our time. And it doesn't mean that every company that we do on the surface, when you look at it, you might ask yourself, like, how is this serving the greater good? But really, if we have to make this argument when, I believe that we have to make this argument every time we write a check, which is how is it serving the greater good? And, what are the ambitions of this founder and what does this unlock and what does this do? And I think when you start thinking this way, you make different decisions. And if somebody else might say, I don't really care about that piece when it comes to the companies. I just want to make as much money as possible so that when I get paid, I can go do this with the money. And that's also okay too. You don't have to say that every single company that you invest in has to make a dent in the world, but I would argue that you do.
Yeah, and that's absolutely okay. If you want to make as much money as possible, it's totally acceptable. But, don't forget to make friends along the way.
Totally.
As we shift over to market sentiment, there is a lot of cynicism in venture capital right now on both the startup side and fundings, and then also on the emerging manager side too. So to break this down, I'd love to start on the startup side. So I'd love to get your perspective on this. What are you seeing, hearing, and what do you believe to be true or not true about this cynicism out there?
I think some of the cynicism has to do with the lack of exits. We've been hearing this over and over again, but I think that's about to change potentially, where M&A might open up in public markets. You might see more companies go public than has been in the last 4 years. But I think, LPs are increasingly uncomfortable with the lack of capital returned. And so that's why you see sort of the cynicism for new emerging fund managers. And it's not that new emerging fund managers are bad. It's just that the ecosystem it's slowed down where people are not, the liquidity is not coming as fast as it ought to.
I think that's totally right. Especially for, everything sort of comes down from the LP ecosystem to the emerging managers are often the folks that are quote unquote the riskiest and the hardest to get funded. And then when there is a dried up pool of capital on one side of it, it just doesn't trickle into the emerging manager as much. And that's unfortunate. But I think these things change. It's a cyclical business. And so that's kind of how I think about the emerging manager side. And the startup side, I'm curious, are you, do you feel like founders are cynical or people who are evaluating companies are cynical? What do you think, Molly?
Hearing it from all sides. I'm hearing founders are cynical. You have to be an AI company or defense.
I see.
It's harder to get dollars.
I see.
Because some managers can't actually deploy any capital. All sorts of stories.
Yeah, there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, zombie managers out there. because they are able to raise, but they still have a fund. And they're still taking meetings, because if you don't take meetings, then you can't get deals, right? And you can't raise more money. It gets to be this horrible cycle. Or they have to be more judicious with the money, right? Like they realize they're being watched like a hawk watching them. And so every
Like
check
a crow.
like a crow. They're being watched, and their performance is being evaluated more than ever before. And so they're really, really hesitant to strike on a lot of things. Then you've got this Cambrian explosion of AI, right? Like when it used to be that when somebody would build a company, you knew the engineering efforts that went behind it. You knew what it would take. But now there's all sorts of things emerging where you have to like really think for yourself, and you can't look at social proof. You can't look at, there's just so many startups, just like there's not a shortage of people trying to start companies, which is incredible. And so I think that's giving people a bit of pause, because they're not sure where to invest. It's like, yes, AI is obviously a thing. We chose picks and shovels, and we invested heavily in the infrastructure of AI. I do think that was the right choice. And but there's going to be a lot of companies that where the first mover advantage is not in their favor at all. And so I think people are holding their bets back and waiting to try to see how that all sorts out. And then defense, I think, is a little bit ahead of its skis. We were just having a conversation earlier, Lee and I, about this. Selling into the government is really hard. And I think people don't understand that. And this may change with the new administration, and it may not. They may get in there and discover just how difficult it is to unseat some of these, entrenched, established people and organizations that do not have any incentive to leave. And so Anduril took a long time to figure out how to sell into the government. And, at some point, maybe that process speeds up. We were discussing this earlier, but it's not going to be right away. And I think that, there's a lot of capital being deployed in that area. And it just sort of remains to be seen of whether or not they have the chops to do those kinds of sales. And because I think people underestimate how hard it is to do an enterprise sale or a government sale. Like, those are two very, very difficult things that take a long time.
I think you're still dealing with the hangover of 20 to 23 or so. From while there wasn't liquidity, there's a movement of like an early stage manager gets to invest in this thing, and then their deal quickly got marked up. And then, wow, all I have to do is go get my deal get marked up. I kind of see what these other people like doing. I should do more of this AI thing or whatever the thing of the moment is. And then the feedback cycle was quite positive. They were getting positive feedback from that system working in the way it did. And now that the exits aren't happening, it's all kind of coming down to some extent, and profitability matters, and all the things that used to matter about businesses are mattering, and so therefore the fund managers aren't getting marked up as much, and then the startups themselves are suffering from a more conservative set of early stage investors who are reacting to the fact that they're not getting that juice, that dopamine hit, that markup that they used to. And that's probably why a lot of people are upset about how, if I'm an AI startup, that's the only way that I'm getting funded. That's a consequence of cheap and consensus thinking, I think, within a group of people who are rewarded a certain way. And from our perspective, we've always tried to be like, let's just not get involved in that as much as we can, and run when others are run into different areas that others are running away from things that people are running towards.
I have a selfish question. How do you guys feel about the services enablement construct of, companies and startups? There's a lot of venture dollars going towards like PE type companies, and applying AI to that. So what's your position on it?
I I always think of things as like Cyan said something about a thumbnail or a fingerprint as a unique thing. I love that. I've never heard you say that. I think of things as snowflakes. Companies are snowflakes. So you have to really evaluate every company individually. So broadly speaking, I don't think I'm neutral on that. I think it just depends on the situation. But certainly there's new ways at which capital formation is happening. One of our partners, Pascal, who's a venture partner, also runs something called Misa Labs, which is his going out and buying small SaaS businesses and being a small P fund. And it's going quite well. So I think you can do that. That can work.
Yeah,
I have no opinion.
It's been an interesting. I was waiting for that.
I'll take this.
Okay.
Awesome. You can have it.
I'll take yours.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so as we wrap up, I have one final question, but two parts. So I want to hear your highlight from 2024, and I want to hear what you're most excited about for 2025.
My highlight, I think it's we just spent an incredible time with our team and the team's families at a retreat, and it was just really amazing to celebrate all the things that have gone really well for the team and in ourselves personally, but also to get to experience it with our families. For my two daughters to be playing with my partner's daughters, that it was just really a special time and an incredible atmosphere. And that was my highlight. I think it for me, my life and work have always been so intertwined. At my wife and I's wedding, I looked out at the group of people. I love them all so much, and then I realized Becca was like, "You've worked with basically all of these people." And I was like, "Oh yeah, this person gave me money, and then I gave them money, and then, this person hired me once." And it's just this intertwining thing. And it's just, I really love that because I can spend time with people I love and friends and all the time. It's a way of integrating all of your things you care about into your life. So that was my highlight. Thing I'm looking forward to, it's continuing to grow personally and learning how to work with other people, because I think and continue to work with other people, because I think if you want to do really amazing things in the world, which I do, you have to continue to be good at working with others and exciting others and motivating others and getting other people and integrating their life, their hopes and dreams into your own, and doing great work together, because it can be pretty lonely if you just want to do things on your own. I just don't think you have as big of an impact. And for me, I'm a social person, so I need to do it with others. The solo GP thing was never going to work.
Yeah, I mean, before I came along, he was solo. And the two of us getting together, we accidentally formed a venture firm. So,
exactly.
We need to get somebody to run operations around here, and we need somebody to mix it. Well, we got to do all this stuff now. I'm going to go with the very first picture that arrived in my mind with that question, because I'm a very visual thinker, and it's going to be a funny one. But we throw this thing called Reverie, and we did our very first founder Reverie. And I remember seeing the tent. We had this tent that we all met in.
Uh-huh.
And when I was walking up to the tent, I was filled with this enormous gratitude for this tent. Now, obviously, I can afford to rent a tent, and I erect my own tent. But there was something about the fact that we built a company and built a venture firm that could afford a tent, and that there were 100 people underneath it.
Uh-huh.
And that we were all gathering together, that just really hit me hard. I remember I almost cried. I was so thankful and so happy about that darn tent. And so I think that leads to what I'm looking forward to, which is we have an office, and we just got an office, and it's our permanent tent.
Wow.
And I'm looking forward to our housewarming party, because our office is a home, which is going to be kind of weird for some people. When you come in, we have a fireplace, and we might be baking cookies, and the memories that we create as a team, like this offsite that we just went on. We have shells that we collected on the beach. They're going on the fireplace, just like a home would be. And there's something so special about having this hub and this home that we gather at. And I can't wait to see what comes out of it. And so I also can't wait to create more of these recipes for these events with Mike and with the team. and just seeing like where we can take this. Because at the end of the day, I am a capitalist, but I'm also an artist. And so being able to merge those two things together and to be a venture capitalist artist or a venture artist is a dream come true for me. And I think that Lee, one of the most remarkable things about being his co-founder is he has always celebrated and tried to honor and draw out my authenticity and who I am as a person. And he sees me. He's always seen me where other people have misunderstood me. And so giving me a canvas and a place where I can play has been remarkable and very special. And I'm glad that people around the world, as you say, are experiencing our events and seeing firsthand how if you treat life a little bit like immersive theater, which it is, one big theater, and as Shakespeare says, we are all actors and this is merely a play and every man and woman plays their part, then you get to have a lot of fun. And so I'm really looking forward to how much fun we get to have as a team and all these magical moments we get to create together. And that's kind of what came to mind right away, and is that darn tent. You know,
More tents.
It's a simple thing. It's a very simple thing, but
Yeah.
we could afford it. So
It's amazing.
that was just darn cool.
It's amazing. Well, Lee, Cyan, this was an incredibly magically weird conversation, and I loved it so much. It was so much fun. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
It was really great.
Thanks, Molly.